Welcome everyone to this Xoogler chat about how to improve your LinkedIn profile. I had the pleasure of getting to know Brenda. First couple of months, we were working at Google together back in 2006, 2007. And it's been a pleasure getting to know her as a colleague and a friend. And she's always been such a supporter of Xooglers and became an Xoogler herself in 2021, joining LinkedIn. And now she's the Senior Director of Online Sales. And when we wanted to do a topic to help others to learn how to improve their LinkedIn profiles, I couldn't think of a better person to invite than Brenda to moderate this chat. And she's brought on two of her friends to actually help educate all of us. So Brenda, over to you. And thank you again for helping the Xoogler community.
Awesome. So what I'm going to do is welcome us in. We have a light run of show, but of course we like to keep things agile depending on where the interest lies. So we thought the best thing to do would be to start out with some introductions. I popped a question in the meeting chat just to get a sense of this vast audience. So I imagine maybe some of us are still at Google, most are ex-Google. So if you can dump in there just like how many years you've been an ex-Googler, that would be just interesting to get a little bit of a heat map of what we've got going on. You get to know each other a little bit better. Yes, thank you so much for having me, for setting this up, Chris, for joining me, Natalie and Jordan. If I can find him in the sea of squares, we'll find him though. I will do some quick intros. I'll go first, and I'll also have Natalie, my dear friend. I was checking LinkedIn. Have we known each other for 10 years? It does tell me that, but I couldn't find it fast enough. But we've known each other a long time, dating back to LinkedIn, Google. And then she also, we connected again when I got to LinkedIn about 18 months ago. Thank you all for answering my questions. And I wanted to keep the intro brief, but what I thought I would do, and then I'll hand it over, stop listening, then I'll hand it over to Natalie to do the same thing, is kind of tell my story in 3 minutes or so using some inflection points to articulate what role LinkedIn did play so that we could just bring it to life a little bit. And so I admittedly was an early LinkedIn adopter, and I understand why now. I've always enjoyed connecting with people. I've enjoyed community, and I really enjoy meeting people and sort of keeping track of their professional milestones. And so it was no doubt that back in 2005, I was one of the first earlier people on the platform, probably connecting with myself and a couple of friends from business school. Fast forward to I was round up, but almost 20 years later, it has played such a role for me in my career. And in some ways it's been a passive role. In some ways it's been an active role. So diving in, I'm based in the US. Currently, I spent my last 16 years, Googler 2007 to 2021. During that time, I worked in New York, Latin America, and California, and I joined LinkedIn 18 months ago. LinkedIn for me first showed up when I was graduating from the MBA from NYU in 2006. So I must have been looking for, starting to job hunt in 2005. And I had the idea of sending what was today's version of InMails to about 85 people who went to my undergrad college, Bucknell, and also worked at an investment bank because I wanted to be a banker in 2006. And I crafted each email, not a copy paste. I wrote each of them out, and I believe that 90% of them replied to me. They might have said, "Hey, so nice to meet you. I can't help you, but look over here." But many of them agreed to meet me for coffee. Fast forward, a few months later, I had a swell of dozens of coffees with bankers, got myself a couple of offers, and ended up rejecting them all to come to Google, but that's a totally different story. So LinkedIn early on, it was just magical for me. And then when I was looking to exit Google, I loved Google. It was wonderful to me. I had a wonderful 15 years, but the earlier magic of the sub 10,000 people, the building, scaling, it had been pretty tapped out. And I really wanted to go to something smaller that felt like earlier Google to me. And so I, did my best without really asking for any help to make sure my profile was updated, and probably tweaked a couple of things. We'll get into those more today. And sure enough, I started getting a nice inbound flow of recruiter outreach. And one of those recruiters worked at LinkedIn, and she brought me in for, the exploratory conversation. I struck out not once, but twice. And the third go, I got a job at LinkedIn. But it all started from a recruiter finding me just out of the blue because I had my open to work button turned on and had some good, my skills pretty well articulated and a nice network size. And so I saw a stat, and don't quote me on this or tweet it, but I believe that LinkedIn was responsible in some way for like 90% of Google's hires in the last couple of years. So that's pretty remarkable. And so I just encourage you, wherever you are in your LinkedIn journey, professional journey, it's okay. Like, this is a good moment to just kind of reflect on where you are and like sort of use this time to think about how you can take a step forward to get more leverage out of the platform. Even though it's never set it and forget it, like I say, even Chris can probably make some tweaks and get more out of it. And so just constantly having, the mindset of how can I continue making this work better for me? So I'm not going to go into tips yet. I'm going to turn over to Natalie, and she is going to introduce herself. And Chris, I think, you're going to send questions to the door. That's great. But I do enjoy the chat. I appreciate it. And thank you all for saying hello if I did know you from back at Google. So over to you, Natalie.
Thanks, Brenda. Well, I feel like that was such a good explanation and definitely shows the power of LinkedIn. I don't think I was quite as early of an adopter, but definitely I think was drawn to the platform in terms of just like celebrating other people's success and staying connected. So I love that aspect. In terms of my experience at Google, I was at Google for about 10 years. I started in sales as an account executive and then became a sales manager for 3 years within Google Customer Solutions. I saw a couple GCS people put that in there. And after being in sales for a while and traveling quite a bit, I decided to pivot to recruiting. So I spent about 3 years in recruiting at Google, which was a really fun time. I had a great team and learned a lot about hiring amazing talent. And of course, that's what Google does, is hire amazing talent. And then kind of fast forward over the past almost 2 years, I was at LinkedIn as a senior recruiter. Similar to Brenda, I've been there since 2011 and just kind of was looking for a new adventure and I like building things too. So I wanted to see if I could try something new and moved over to LinkedIn. And actually, so I've been recruiting for leadership talent and learned a lot about LinkedIn and really using it as a tool to hire and find great talent. LinkedIn did help me get my job at LinkedIn because I had reached out to someone on LinkedIn, just kind of checking in on them. And then one thing leads to another. You have a coffee chat, just kind of relationship based, which I think is really cool about the platform too. Kind of fast forward to now, I was actually laid off 2 weeks ago from LinkedIn as a recruiter. So I'm in the same boat as maybe some of you are. And right now I'm at another pivot point. So it'll be interesting to see how I use LinkedIn to leverage my career. I've been doing a side hustle for quite a while now, for about 3 years, and coaching people on the side. Haven't been so bold to put it on my profile because I didn't want a conflict of interest. But now I'm excited because I'm going to turn my side hustle into a full-time gig and coach and help people with their careers. So if any of you would want to connect with me on LinkedIn, feel free to reach out. Just mention that you're part of this group. That way I know, and I'm working on some resources, so I'd be happy to send those your way too.
Fantastic. And I just put a shameless plug also for some LinkedIn connections. It's a kind of I'll just spend a moment on that because everybody has a different way of deciding who to connect with and who to accept. And my philosophy, I'm not going to tell you this is the one you should use or that it's right, but a while back, I was just getting such a volume of requests. It was just taking me too long to figure out, do I know them? Where did I meet them? Was it at that one conference? And so I just said, you know what? I'm going to turn off the thinking and just accept everybody. And then outbound, I also, if I hear your name, I'm likely to, if I'm going to stop on your profile page, I'm probably going to hit the connect button because why not? And it goes to the power of one of the first points that I want to make, which is like N squared, your network. The bigger it is, the better. I haven't found in my fairly extensive experience that there's been really any downside to accepting a lot of connections, even if I don't know them very well, but it's up to you and your own appetite for being connected with strangers, essentially. But in any case, I imagine that the intent, I assume in positive intent, I also Really enjoy keeping track of my professional network and have not regret the decision. I don't get an overwhelming amount of outreach unless it's really warranted. So it hasn't bothered me at all. Okay, so what I thought that we would do, we were going to cut this in a couple different ways and spend about like 20 minutes. We'll start, say for starters, I can go first and then we can have Natalie talk about tips from a recruiter standpoint. And I actually think it kind of be fun too, if you can just share how you are planning on using it now as a recent Xoogler yourself. And what I thought that I would do is kind of give us the lens of a job seeker. And I can take you through some of my favorite sections and like the hottest tips that I find are like the biggest, like sort of fails for folks when I do go in and look at their profiles. And once we get through those sort of core concepts that might hit some of the questions in the Dory, we can then start to address some of the questions in the Dory. Chris, I know that we've done these before. So if you want to interject and just think it's the right time for a question, like if you're watching the Dory, I'm watching the group, please let us know. You have every right to come in and interject. So yeah. So I'll start with like, okay, remember, we're looking at this through the lens of like, I'm a member, I'm a LinkedIn member, I might be a job seeker in this moment, or maybe I'm passive, I'm active. I just want to make sure my profile is as strong as possible for whatever your reasons might be. And where do you begin? I just recommend that you begin by taking an honest assessment of how you think your profile is today and just, agree that there's probably something you could do to make it stronger. I think that the tips that I'll share should help you no matter what your goals are, but we can also take, questions if you have goals that are more specific and we don't get a chance to really uncover today. So when I think of myself, more recently, I was in that job seeking mode for about 3 years because I was being really specific. I was taking a lot of calls and I really wanted to make sure that when I left, my dream company, Google, that I was going somewhere that was just as amazing. And so I really focused on optimizing the profile to get a high volume of inbound, but it was also very strategic about my outbound outreach. I kind of sunset the whole, let me write 85 emails thing early on and kind of pivoted my strategy now 20 years later. But from an inbound perspective, we can start with like, I always say, take it from the top, right? So the thing that I feel has, helped me the most has been just to make sure that like anything above the fold, imagining like just like a resume, people might not scroll down, right? A recruiter might not scroll down, a hiring manager might not scroll down, an interviewer might not scroll down. So how do you make sure that whatever's above the fold transmits who you are, what your superpowers are, and what you want to do? And so there's a lot of elements above the fold. This might take you the better part of a day just to get this done, right? So one of the Jim Lazinski talks, he was like, don't have a big gray rectangle behind your head. It just shows you've made no effort. Like think about how to use every square centimeter of that profile to make sure you are maximizing it. So think about your picture, make sure it's professional. If you have no picture, that actually doesn't do you any good in terms of helping you index higher in the search results. Think thoughtfully around how you want to use that rectangle behind you to, again, represent who you are, what you care about. And you don't work at Google anymore, so that shouldn't be a Google rectangle. It should be something else. And there's lots of great ideas that you can steal with pride from looking at other people's profiles all over LinkedIn. Moving down, I like to call it the tweet that sits just below your name. I don't know if it's 140 characters or what, haven't checked, it's probably a little bit longer, but a lot of us, including myself, used to just write our job title in there. I actually think that should be used to summarize you as you want the world to see you. And you can put in there anything that really expresses like what you are, who you are, and what you want to be known for. So just to take my own example, I have that I am a LinkedIn, I work at LinkedIn, I'm an ex-Xoogler, I am a chemical engineer, I am a board member. And I just wanted to make sure that was sort of what folks took away. And so I would say like optimize that and even like continue to optimize it. Again, if you think that you could do, continue to make it stronger. Moving into the About Us section. This is a great one because a lot of people leave this blank. And I highly recommend, sorry, I said About Us, About. So in the about section, this is where I believe you get to really bring your superpowers to life. And so I think that, the old school way, and this was probably our fault for making the algorithm just like pick up keywords from this section, don't just stuff this with a bunch of hashtags and keywords. Really explain who you are, what your superpowers are, what you want, not only what you do now, but like where you want to go. And so like that to me is like taking that tweet from under your name and really bringing it to life and telling the universe what it is that you want in this world. And then one more sort of above the fold, important thing for you to look at is this open to button. So this is the blue button that's sort of floating right below your follower count. This is what got me the inbound leads from recruiters and hiring managers and other folks that were in a position to like employ me. I turned that on. I was thoughtful in the roles that I chose, and I selected that I am immediately and actively applying. And with that, I started, it was a different economy, of course, the last 3 years, but I started to get a really interesting influx of recruiters and hiring managers who were looking at my profile and sending me that initial outreach to say, hey, we're interested in you. Would you be interested in us? If yes, set up a call. I was selective, but I allocated, a good part of my day on Fridays to take those calls if I thought it passed my first filter. And I got, that was what helped me really sort of start practicing the interview skill set and getting to a place where I could actually feel really confident in my own story. And then I'm going to go through just a couple more that are more below the fold. So when we get into experience as a newer feature, I don't know how new it is anymore, but essentially if with your experience, it should be a mirror of your resume. I wouldn't say you don't want to have a resume and then a totally different LinkedIn. You want to just make them mirror each other. It's easier. One thing, and you've got it, working for you in both places. Keep it updated. Let people know that you're on a career break. It's okay. Let them know that you're part of the 12K. It's okay. That is, everybody understands this day and age that layoffs are a real thing, and they want to know what you're doing with your newfound freer time, those extra 40 to 60 hours that you just got back in your week. The skills, you can add skills tags to each experience. And that's one of the newer functions that wasn't there before. And the one that I most often see people miss. And I do believe this helps you get indexed for those skills that you are selecting for each of your experiences. And then of course you want to just make sure that you're writing not too long, but just the key takeaways for each of those roles, showing job progression. So don't show that you had, a 7-year-long experience. You likely want to break that up and show any pivots, job scope increases, promotions, et cetera, that you had during those blocks of time. It just shows, well, this is going to probably bleed into Natalie, so I will just pause on that one. And then finally, education. I played around with this a little bit, but I had a couple of certificates and I pushed them down to allow my MBA and my undergrad to kind of stay at the top. But you want to, if you've done some extra learning type of stuff, like any internal programs at Google or external, I just encourage you to put them on there. And so I say, in sort of pausing at this moment, homework for y'all, I would say look at your number of connections today, and whatever you have, strive to exit. Like, again, the power of the network might be the number one thing that is going to help you get noticed, indexed, reached out to, and really boost that inbound and give you that credibility that's so very important depending on your goals. And then the other homework that I would give you is to spend a little time looking around at other people's profiles and sort of earmark some of those that you think are really strong, and allow that to kind of put your own into perspective and help you kind of work out that language in your tweet, in your about section, and just ensure that you're showing to the world what it is that your superpowers are and what you want from this life. So I'll pause there because I'm excited to get into questions, and I want to hear from the recruiter perspective. I know we're excited. So let's go to Natalie and hear what she has to add to that.
Sure. Thanks, Brenda. I love what you mentioned about the superpowers and strengths, because that's actually exactly something that I wrote down. And I use the term superpowers because I think that is something that's really important. So I'll kind of go through what I have in my notes. I really want you to think about LinkedIn as your marketing tool. This is really where like you own the real estate, you own the message, just like we would tell our advertisers. That's your space. So you really have to capitalize on that. And coming from a Google experience, when you think about your impact and you're writing your job description, or, you have your roles, I really encourage you to go a little deeper, like include things that you would put on your resume, make things quantifiable, just like you would in your perf, right? Like, how are you showing impact on the things that you've done? Another piece, like from a recruiter standpoint, is how can you communicate your work really clearly? Sometimes people might be in very technical roles, and recruiters are not always experts in the field that you're in, right? They're experts in recruiting, and they probably have familiarity, but it could almost look like a foreign language if they're not familiar. So think about how can you put your language and all of those details into your profile that really anyone could understand what you do. Of course, experts in your field will really understand, but have some language in there that makes it really clear and understanding, especially for recruiters, make our jobs a little bit easier. From a Google perspective, Google has a lot of fancy titles, and sometimes we like to get real creative, right? With all of the titles that aren't always industry norm titles. And so I would tell you to take creative liberty on your title if it is not the industry standard. So if you're applying for a role and it is commonly called something else in the industry, go ahead and update it on your profile to reflect that, because you want recruiters, when they're using LinkedIn Recruiter to search, they're going to search by title, they're going to search by skill, they're going to put all those things into their search function. And if your title is totally something not common or irrelevant, like, you won't show up in that search. A common thing that I come across, I feel like I'm skipping around a little bit, but stay with me here. If you've been in a leadership role, a people manager role, or any like team lead type role, sometimes as a leadership recruiter, people did not put that on their profile. They'd have their job title. It was so unclear. Did you lead a team? How big was your team? So any advice to someone who's led a team before, make sure you actually state clearly, led a team of 20 individuals in this capacity, or just make it easy. Even stating how many years you've been a manager or a leader, I think is really helpful, because that's one of the first things hiring managers will look at a profile. And I say, I think they have management experience. I said, well, they don't say it on their profile. I'm not really interested. It looks like they're an individual contributor. So that's just something to note for leadership. And then the same goes, like, if you are an individual contributor, I really encourage you to showcase the scope of your work. So how large, what was your